I'm Bob Henderson. I'm the Nomad Dad. I ask you, are storm clouds gathering in the Western world, in the world in general? I would say perhaps. Seems like things are upside down over the last 5 years. It's not just COVID. I think things started before that. We're living in a cultural revolution, whether you want to admit it or not. And this revolution is not from the bottom up, it's from the top down. Many average, ordinary Americans are outnumbered by the institutions and the powerful people. But it's a cultural revolution nonetheless. And there's financial implications to it too, with all the indebtedness and these sorts of things. We'll talk more about that maybe in a later episode. But our storm clouds gathering, much like prior to World War II. Think about 1938 when Neville Chamberlain in England came back and said, "We have peace in our time," the great appeaser. And it wasn't more than a year after that that the Germans started World War II. And there were some people that saw this in Germany, perhaps beforehand. I think of people like David Cohen, Anna Stein in Germany that started to help getting people out of the country that were being oppressed or worst during the worst time of World War II throughout the 1940s. Jewish people were definitely oppressed, there's no question about it. One of the families that you've seen in the movies, of course, and a book to begin with, the Von Trapp family in Austria, and their country was annexed by Hitler, and they had to come up with a plan to escape, and they first went over the mountains to Italy and wound up in Southern California before they wound up in Stowe, Vermont, because it reminded them of their home near Salzburg, Austria, which is an absolutely beautiful place. But of course, that was The Sound of Music. I'll come back to The Sound of Music in just a moment. But first to Germany. I talked a few episodes ago about famous Americans that renounced citizenship in one country and came to the U.S. And Henry Kissinger, the brilliant Henry Kissinger, was one of the people that escaped Nazi Germany at a very young age in the 1940s. So these were people who maybe in the 30s recognized the gathering storm clouds. Maybe it took them a little bit longer, but they actually left their country of residence because things got bad enough. And they probably left friends and family behind forever. And speaking of Jewish population, the Nomad Mom and I have been to a number of cities with a pretty large Jewish quarter, places like Warszawa, which is Warsaw in Poland. And how it was just an awful scene at the end of World War II there. Krakow in Poland. And in Budapest, Hungary, in the Jewish quarter. There's a beautiful synagogue there, picture here. And it's been renovated and redone. And a lot of the money was either raised by or donated by the American, Tony Curtis, whose family was Hungarian, and his daughter, the actress Jamie Lee Curtis, had a lot to do with putting it back together. But a lot of these people went to South America, or they came to the United States, if they lived, to tell about it, and they left their country of residence. Isn't this what Nomad Capitalist is all about? And we certainly, I would think, in one way or another, have gathering storm clouds today. I'm not sure, I'm not smart enough to know where it winds up, but I think you should start thinking about a plan B. Oh, and speaking of World War II and oppressed people, how about the Japanese that were American citizens living in America? One of the worst things we've ever done as a country, put those people in internment camps after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor at Honolulu in 1941. These people were American citizens. How could they possibly see that coming? So these are things to consider. I mean, can you see it coming? If you can, you need to do something about it. I'm going to use a hockey metaphor. You need to skate to where the puck's going to be, not where it is today if you're looking at the gathering storm clouds. But I don't know what those Japanese would have done, because that came up pretty suddenly. And it's a very sad chapter in American history, if I may say so. Back on the Von Trapps for a moment. I was in Salzburg several years ago, and I did go on the Sound of Music tour. And we had a wonderful guide. He was a Brit. I love listening to the Brits with the accent. The guy was brilliant. He was a lot of fun. He would talk about the things on the tour, and then when he didn't have anything left to say, play the wonderful music from the Sound of Music, the Rodgers and Hammerstein music. And then we got to the end, and he was totally done with his presentation. We're almost back to the bus yard, And of course, he plays Edelweiss. And there wasn't a dry eye on the bus. And I started thinking then, and this is pre-COVID, by the way, are we on the verge of an Edelweiss moment in the U.S. or other Western countries? I think it's something that we should seriously be thinking about. I mean, the Von Trapps in 1935, I think they left in 1940, and 35, 37, whatever, I doubt they thought this was going to become an issue. But all of a sudden it did. You better have a plan. And I will just say one thing in conclusion with regard to the Von Trapps, because I learned when I was in Salzburg that they eventually relocated to Stowe, Vermont. And I remember earlier a few weeks ago, I was doing my presidential birthplace series, and I'd been to one of the presidential birthplaces way up in northern Vermont. And I went to the birthplace of Chester Alan Arthur, and I ended up having dinner about a half an hour away in Stowe, Vermont, one of the most beautiful cities you'll ever see. It looks like the Alps, like Salzburg. And I had dinner at the Von Trapp Lodge, and I just felt a tingling sensation and how wonderful it was to be. I believe it's the third generation of Von Trapps running the lodge. And a great story, and they escaped because not only did they see the gathering clouds, but they executed a plan. And I think we all need to be thinking today about what our plan would be. Are we going to have an Edelweiss moment? Time will tell. I'm Bob Henderson. I'm the Nomad Dad.